Alright, I am back with another build, and today we are doing the next in the Deity build series, Mystra. And as you can clearly see, this is also going to double as an origin build as well for Gale, because, I mean, come on, Gale is Mystra's chosen. How could I not use Gale for this video? Don't worry, Gale is not required for this build. You can absolutely do this with any sort of character you like, but Gale just felt so appropriate to use here. Now, I'm actually going to this is a weird thing, but I think this is almost like a sequel to my original Gale origin build. For those of you that don't know, I made quite the controversial choice to make Gale primarily a wild magic sorcerer, with the idea that because the tadpole had wrecked his kind of connection with the weave and connection to Mystra, he ended up unconsciously starting to wield the power of the Neverese orb inside him, which of course then in turn caused his magic to go wild and out of control. I think this is a post-game Gale, who, after the events of Baldur's Gate 3, if you've seen the epilogue, there will be some mild spoilers for Gale's story here, but it's nothing too crazy. I mean, the game's been out for a while now. But if you've seen the epilogue, you might know where I'm going with this. But I definitely think that Gale would definitely stay within Mystra's favour if we're kind of going down the good guy route. He would definitely recover the crown, but he would definitely hand it over to Mystra. And I would say this is definitely a post-epilogue Gale who basically found, like, his calling. I mean, he became a professor in a school in Waterdeep, and as such, he kind of, as he got a little bit older, started to turn into a bit more of an Elminster type. Now, the title of this video, The Weave Anchor, may seem a bit confusing to you if you don't know about Mystra's origin, or kind of backstory. So, there are these certain individuals that Mystra basically gives a small portion of herself, a portion of the weave. Not in the same way that, like, any spellcaster just kind of manipulates the weave around them, no. She straight up embeds the weave inside of them. Elminster is a prime example of this, as well as, kind of in a weird twist, Volo is also an unknowing weave anchor. And again, these guys are kind of just made to stabilize the weave. Their very existence keeps the balance of magic in check. Basically a security measure, so the Carsus thing never happens again. Now, I think Gale, at one point, was definitely a weave anchor. I mean, it would make sense with how close he was to Mystra. But with my other origin build, I think because of what happened, his betrayal of Mystra, the absorption of the Neverese orb, I definitely think she would have revoked that status. But I think, again, going for the best possible ending for Gale, in my opinion personally, he would definitely have regained that kind of favour, and as such became a weave anchor once again. So as such, we have kind of an older, more wizardy looking Gale as a weave anchor. Now, let's actually get into the build now that I've kind of got the kind of background stuff out of the way. And as you can see here, we are starting with Sorcerer. The reason I'm starting with Sorcerer here is it's going to give us a few things. Constitution saving proficiency, which we always like. A couple of spells that I'm quite happy to get. It's also going to give us a subclass in which I'm choosing Draconic Bloodline, which is going to give us the ability to basically have Mage Armour without needing to cast it. And an extra hit point, because that's probably the most important thing we're going to be getting here. But you know what I mean. Obviously not. But, basically, I kind of feel like we can justify it, right? With Gale being a weave anchor, yes, his study of magic is incredible, but I think that base amount of the weave that he holds within himself is now just augmenting his very being. I think even though Gale is a bit older, maybe his aging is slightly slowed, he's definitely kind of getting into that Elminster vibe of just being so in tune with the weave and Mystra herself that he just kind of transcends normal human limits. And as such, I think a little bit of that magic has now just become a part of his being, making him a sorcerer. Now, obviously, we're only taking one level of sorcerer here. Don't worry, we are going to be primarily a wizard with this build, again, rectifying my earlier choices, which I still stand by was a great build for Gale, just, you know, not a wizard build. So, regardless, enough of my rambling, let's actually get into it. As for our cantrips, from Sorcerer we only really want utility options. Friends is great, it's just a great cantrip anyway. Minor Illusion makes perfect sense for Gale. Again, he went on to teach magic in a school in Waterdeep, a very prestigious magic college, and illusion was his specialty, and And he just basically specifies it as being his favourite school of magic, so getting a minor illusion here makes sense. Alongside Mage Hand and Dancing Lights. Mage Hand because it is just the generically useful everyday spell that a lot of mages would have. I mean, we don't have Prestidigitation in this game, this is a close second, and Dancing Lights, because I guarantee Gale, as a teacher, would be one of those teachers that's just extra as fuck. He's the science teacher who comes into the science lab and with the idea that he is going to put a £5 bill on the table and he is going to light that on fire and turn it all sorts of different colours. He's going to make explosions, he's going to show you all the cool things that science does, but instead of science, it's magic, which in this world, I guess, kind of just is science? Because magic is just science you can't explain, right? So, but we can explain the magic in D&D because it comes from Mystra, which is what the video's about. Gale is a scientist. I have decided this fact now. Anyways, so yeah, and I feel like he would just have like panache with like things like Dancing Lights and all these other little fun cantrips to just make his you know, his classes very whimsical and fun. I bet he would he'd be one of those dudes who like projects the galaxy over the ceiling. Anyways, I'm done. My Gale teacher fan canon is coming out. Anyways, spells. I've chosen a couple of utility options here. Shield, of course, one of the best utility spells in the game, does not require our charisma stat to be high, so I would say this is just something you can pick up with one of your 2 Sorcerer spells, just because you're going to pick it anyway. You might as well get it from here. I also go for Disguise Self, again, not reliant on our spellcasting modifier, and it is an illusion spell. Come on, Gale would totally walk into the classroom and act like everything's normal while disguised as, like, a beholder or something. I know that's not really what the spell does, but you get my point, right? Like, he would just do everything so extra. He would be that fun teacher who just plays pranks on his students all the time, and Disguise Self is prime for that. And again, with him having his favorite class of spells be illusion, I mean, come on. It just makes sense. Anyways, as we said, subclass is Draconic Bloodline. For our Dragon Ancestor, we are going with White Cold. Again, this is not... I'm not really going to be considering, like, flavouring for this or anything like that. Again, the Draconic Ancestry thing doesn't really matter. We mainly just want Armour for Gathis, giving us 5 temporary hit points and 5 additional cold damage and retaliation upon taking a melee attack, and that multiplies per spell slot level, meaning we can have a maximum of 30 temporary HP. And since this build is going to be quite tanky if you build it exactly how I have here, then this is going to come in really, really handy, and that retaliation damage is always nice. As for our scales, we don't have any because, come on. And finally, our ability scores. Now, this is what I used for testing, but since I've kind of done my testing, I've actually decided to bump Wisdom up to 12. As much as Gale would absolutely have Charisma, especially after what I've just said, mechanically we don't need it, and you can kind of make up for it if you just grab some proficiency bonuses there. But we don't really want it. I kind of want a little bit more Wisdom, and you'll see why when we get to it. So, Dexterity at 14. I feel like this is perfectly fine for Gale. Again, with our kind of unarmored defense that we're going to be using, this will get us to around 18 AC by default. And since I care more about concentration saving throws, I feel like this is perfectly fine. You'll find that with Shield as well, this is going to be more than enough to get the job done. Constitution, as I said, is at 16. This is going to help with our HP and Constitution saving throws. We are going to be a squishy wizard for the most part, meaning that our HP, I think, is going to be somewhere in the mid-80s by the time we're finished here. So we definitely want to make sure that we have our Constitution to be able to get to that decent amount of HP. And again, stacked with things like temp HP from Armour for Gathis and some other features I'll get into in a minute, we're going to have a surprisingly tanky wizard. As for our intelligence, obviously it's our main spellcasting stats, so we're going to have that at 16, and wisdom is at 12. Again, feel free to drop this down to 10 and put some points into charisma if you want to, but I think wisdom does make sense. I think he has definitely gained some more wisdom since his ordeal in this game, and as such, we have a bit of a 12 in wisdom here, and again, it is going to synergize with some features we'll be getting in a minute. As for skill proficiencies, Gale comes with the Sage background, meaning he has Arcana and History by default, and I wouldn't change that because it's perfect. Now, we can also pick up any skill, any of the kind of skills here that we like. We get 3 thanks to also being a human. I've given him religion proficiency as a human because to me that makes sense. Again, we're going to be kind of focusing on the Mystra side of things here, and I feel like if he's really into it with the whole Mystra thing, he's going to have some knowledge on religion. And religion is kind of like a side thing to Arcana. I think a lot of the time they overlap, so it just makes sense for him to have it. As for the rest, I definitely think Insight would be an important one to have. Again, I feel like that's just something Gale would have. Gale having Insight just sounds right, but maybe that's not for you. And again, we probably do want a kind of skill proficiency here. I mean, if we're going with my flavoring, performance would absolutely work, but obviously we're not going to focus on that here. I would say just grab Persuasion. I don't know. I want a charisma skill for Gale, and that feels pretty good. Right, next up at level 2, we're going to take a quick 1-level dip, and you already know what this is. We're going with Cleric. As with all of my deity builds, we take a quick dip into Cleric to be able to grab dialogue options. Now, Gale, if you're playing as him as an origin, has his own unique dialogue options anyway, but being a Cleric of Mystra will give him some more, and it's especially recommended if you're not actually playing as Gale, because again, you want those Mystra dialogue options. And of course, Mystra, the mother of all magic. Mystra oversees the weave and spreads arcane knowledge to mortal spellcasters. Her Clerics preserve ancient lore and protect bastions of magical energy. Weave anchor stuff. And, you know, I mean, we all know Mystra, and in fact Mystra is one of the more popular deities in the game because she actually has a presence in the game, similar to Shah and Saluna and all that sort of thing. So I don't feel like I need to go into too much detail about who Mystra is, because Gale basically gives you the whole thing in the game, so we're going to move on. As for our cantrips, of course we're going to be taking our standard cleric stuff. I've done this in pretty much every deity build. Resistance, guidance, and thaumaturgy. Again, bonus to saving throws, bonus to ability checks, and an advantage on intimidation and performance checks. Oh, you know, super eccentric scientist teacher Gale is using thaumaturgy to make his grand entrance. I'm obviously leading into the stage magician build kind of things here. Go watch that if you haven't already. As for our subclass, of course, we're taking Mistress subclass of Knowledge. I wish we had Arcana, but we don't. So we're going with Knowledge, which is also her domain. Knowledge is adaptable and adroit in all manner of languages and skills. Knowing your mind is an intellectual cup brimming with exquisite knowledge. I mean, come on, that's perfect. Is exactly what I'm thinking of here. We gain 2 domain spells, Command and Sleep. We're not really going to be using these as our wisdom isn't really good enough to justify it, so we'll just ignore that for now. However, we are going to get 2 skill expertise. We can take Arcana, History, Nature, or Religion as our kind of expertise here, and I'm deciding I think Arcana and Religion makes the most sense for this build, but I can absolutely see History as well. Now we're going to get 2 spells. My original testing for this build only had 1 spell, but there is a second one I wanted to grab. The first one is Sanctuary, because of course it is. It's one of the best spells in the game, period. I've decided this might be the best spell in the game, making you immune to most damage other than like area of effect spells, making it so you cannot be directly attacked. As a spellcaster who can cast a bunch of support spells, again, wizards get access to almost all spells in the game, this will allow you to set up for big combat encounters without needing to worry. This spell is going to be the cornerstone of a future live stream I have planned. Stay tuned for info on that. Next up, though, is the kind of reason I wanted to shift to this level 12 of Wizard, so we get this second spell slot, and that is Bless. Because believe it or not, Bless actually has a certain connection to Mystra that I'll get into later, but for now, a Chosen of Mystra definitely wants to have this. So we're picking up Sanctuary and Bless here. Next up, we are done with any other levels. It's time to get into the main attraction, Wizard, the rest of the way. Wizard is going to give us a ton of things, obviously more cantrips, and at this point we're going to get our offensive core. Firebolt for being that pretty standard big mote of damage, Fray of Frost to be able to reduce movement speed and get a different element, as well as Shocking Grasp for melee shenanigans. I love picking up these 3, I always love getting my elemental trio. Next up, for spells, we have quite a lot of options here. Again, we already have utility options like Shield and Mage Armour built in, so we don't have to worry about that here, and giving us a bit more freedom in what we want to choose. Obviously, the Mage's bog standard, Magic Missile, definitely a pickup, as well as Chromatic Orb. Just having access to all of the elements makes sense. Find Familiar, because, again, come on, game, like, having a wizard with a familiar is just stereotypical D&D stuff anyway, but come on, you know Gale is hiding familiars around the classroom and using them to, like, jump scare people or, like, you know, add a little bit of whimsy, or just have a cat sleeping on his desk when Tara's not around. You know the drill. This is just part of Gale's being at this point, as far as I'm concerned. I am really letting my headcanon run away with things at the moment. Anyways, we're also going to grab the movement stuff. Longstrider, Enhanced Sleep, and Featherfall, because it's some of the most useful utility to have. And yeah, we'll just leave those as is. Next up, we get to choose our subclass at level 2 of Wizard. And if I'm being honest, any of these work. As obviously stated, illusion would be the most on theme for Gale specifically, because he is a master of illusion. That is his specialty. It would get you things like, at this level, improved minor illusion, allowing you to use it as a bonus action. You can cast it while you remain hidden, and you can cast it while you're silenced. I think most of that stuff is just regular minor illusion stuff, but being able to use it as a bonus action would be nice. And again, Gale having spectral cats all over the room, he would totally do that. But otherwise, it's not really a powerful subclass in my opinion. Its late level features don't really justify it, and the main thing you'd be getting out of it is learning illusion spells for a lower cost from scrolls, but again, doesn't really feel like that's worth it. So I'm going to give a usage case for all of the subclasses, except for the ones I have chosen, which I'll go into more detail about. Transmutation. I mean, transmutation is great. I've used it in a lot of builds. Being able to make two alchemy solutions per, ritual or whatever it is, alchemic hoobie-jeebies. What was that word? Basically, it's really, really useful. You get the things like the Transmuter Stone later on. Could be really fun. Illusion we've already gone over. Again, you can do some fun trickery with illusion stuff, but the actual subclass itself might not be worth it. Divination, one of my favourite subclasses for Wizard, my personal favourite probably, and one of the most powerful, but also the most fun, giving you the portent die, allowing you to alter rolls, giving you little side quests to get even more of those die. It's just super fun. I absolutely love Divination. Enchantment, being able to charm enemies and foes alike is always great. I mean, enemies and foes is the same thing. You can tell I'm excited because I'm just saying random stuff to try and make this sound more interesting than it probably actually is, and just failing by making myself sound like an idiot. People listen to these videos. All they do is just listen to them in the background, and they must raise an eyebrow like, what the hell is he talking about? Anyways, you'd get something like Hypnotic Gaze, allowing you to charm and incapacitate a creature that cannot attack you. Later on, you'd get a really powerful ability around level 10 to be able to target multiple targets with single target enchantment spells. So things like Hold Person and Hold Monster, Touch the City's Laughter, being able to target multiple people is really strong, actually. It comes in basically at the final level of the build, so it might not be worth trying to build just around that, but I can see a future for that in a different build. Conjuration is kind of cool. I think there's a way to mix this with Tempest Cleric that could be quite interesting. You get the ability to teleport at level 6, which I think is probably the most interesting feature about it, but getting Create or Destroy Water as well, and also the ability to turn into a Blue Jay at level 10. I don't know, there's probably something fun to do with that flavor-wise. Necromancy. If you want to make a summoner build, this is how you do it, being able to basically get a bunch of bonuses to Raised Undead, and combine that with the other summoning spells in the game to create a whole army to follow you around. Evocation. You want to cast Fireball, and you don't want to care about where you point it. This will save you from being hit by your own fireballs, or your allies being hit by your fireballs as well, with Sculpt spells, as well as the ability to add your intelligence modifier to all of your evocation spells later on. This can be really, really powerful, and is the preferred subclass of many. The one we're going to be going for today is Abjuration. You twist and harden the weave into arcane wards to protect yourself and others. I definitely think in his later years, Gale would definitely want to kind of bolster up his defenses, and being able to spread those defenses to others, again protecting those in need. A bit of a hero type as well in all of his eccentric nature. And Arcane Ward is going to synergize perfectly with the fact that we've taken the levels that we have, the dip into Sorcerer and the dip into Cleric, as that gave us two extremely powerful Abjuration spells to fuel this feature. So, Arcane Ward. Residual magic of your spell forms a ward around you that protects you from harm. So basically, what Arcane Ward does, because that's a pretty poor explanation, will allow you to basically create this force field around yourself that's fueled every time you cast an Abjuration spell. You gain an amount of Arcane Ward charges equal to the spell slot equal to the spell slot level of the spell you cast, upcast, whatever. And basically, every time you would take a hit, the damage you would take is reduced by the amount of charges you have, and then you lose one charge. So say I get hit with an attack that does 20 damage, I have 10 charges, which is the maximum we can have. I would take 10 damage instead of 20, and then I would lose a charge, so I only have 9. But, again, we'll be able to use things like Sanctuary and Armour of Agathis, which are both Abjuration spells, to be able to fuel this feature quite well. So, overall, definitely the one I want to go with, specifically for synergizing with Cleric, which we were going to have to take anyway. So, I quite like this, but again, any of these will work. My second option would probably be either Divination or Evocation, and then the rest are kind of following suit after that. Spells, we do get a couple more after that very, very long explanation. This is going to be a long video. Wizard videos are always very long. And again, pick whatever you like. Tasha's Laughter and Grease are just 2 fun control spells. Prepare spells, yep, we got them all. Right, at Wizard level 3, we're going to get access to level 2 spells, and I really want to pick up 2 really useful utility spells. Mirror Image, which is also an illusion spell, again, something very fitting for Gale, and Misty Step, one of the most powerful utility spells in the game, right up there with Shield and Sanctuary. Definitely want to get these 2 as part of our combo to make us highly maneuverable, combining this with other spells as well, like Slow later on, which you will have seen in the combat footage, to really get a lot out of this sort of thing, making us even more tanky. Next up, we do get another cantrip at this level, and I think I'm going to pick up Poison Spray. Next up with, we also get level 2 spells as well, and again, this is a pick your favourite situation, because really, any of these spells will fit this build. Gale will know all of them, and remember, you can pick up other spells from scrolls as well, so collect them all. You're going to want to get as many spells onto this guy as you possibly can. So we're going to have Hold Person, I think, as our first option, and we'll grab Scorching Ray for a reliable range damage option. And again, we can prepare these spells, so let's do that. We also do get to pick up our first feat. A bit late, obviously level 6, but of course you don't have to take that Cleric dip right away or whatever have you. But again, our intelligence is going to be pretty decent for what we're trying to do, especially if you have gear that boosts spell save DC. So I'm not too worried about getting these ability improvements a bit later, and we're not gunning for something like extra attack, so it's not too bad. But we are going to do the obvious thing and just bump up our intelligence. Next up, at Wizard level 5, we are going to get level 3 spells, and of course, we're going to be taking Counterspell. Counterspell is just one of the most powerful utility options as well. A lot of utility options here, but Counterspell is just that classic, really good D&D spell. As well as, I can imagine Gale, again, in his classroom, they're doing maybe some work with evocation magic. He's got them, like, in the schools, basically, like, magic firing range. And one of these students is about to unleash a fireball that's way more powerful than it probably should be, so he counterspells it immediately to stop people from getting burned. Stuff like that. Again, I love this idea of flavouring these really powerful magical spells into just mundane everyday life stuff in a weird way, because again, that would be Gale's everyday. Oh, that student's about to blow us all up, counterspell. Look, take it back next time. Like, stuff like that. I feel like this sort of thing is just such a fun way to look at like classes like Wizard, about people who are just like, oh, here we go again, this is just my day. I love it. I love this kind of flavouring for this sort of thing. But speaking of Fireball, of course, we're taking it because it's Fireball. Why wouldn't I take Fireball? As for our prepared spells, let's just slap the 2 new ones we got. Because, again, if we're going to play the most basic stereotypical wizard again ever for this build, we might as well grab the 2 most stereotypical spells. Spin. Anyways, next up, we do get to grab some more wizard spells. Oh, we are at level 6. I'll quickly go over Protective Ward. Protective Ward basically means that now our Arcane Ward can spread to our allies. We can sacrifice charges of our ward to reduce the damage that allies will take. So now we're protecting the whole party, or again, our students when they're inevitably about to blow themselves up. So, there you go. We're also going to pick up 2 extra spells, and let's grab some more of the best there is. I want Haste, because of course I do, it just feels so right for a build like this, allowing you to either spam spells, left, right, and center, or buff an ally. But you can go for something like Lightning Bolt, Gaseous Form, Glyph of Warding, anything you like. But for my other choice, I'm actually going to go with Slow. I feel like Slow is kind of undervalued in this game, and in D&D in general. Slow is one of the most powerful control spells in the game, in my opinion, targeting up to 6 creatures to slow them down. Movements and actions are affected, and their AC and dexterity saves are reduced by 2. Basically, they can't take an action and a bonus action in the same turn, and they can't take reactions. That is powerful. To target up to 6 creatures in an encounter with that effect, that can shut down entire encounters, especially if those creatures are forced to use melee like you will see in the combat footage, and then just Misty Step away. Like, and they're also easier to hit, meaning it's a great spell. I honestly think that there's a lot of situations where you would think, oh yeah, let's cast Haste to make our one character really powerful, but actually, Slow is the better option. Yes, having that one character feel really powerful is the power fantasy, and you want to feel like the powerful, overpowered hero, but just slow your enemies down. That's how I would do it. In fact, I'm going to pop that on there. I've made a case for it. Next up, at Wizard level 7, we are going to get access to level 4 spells, and again, I think Gale, being the illusion master that he is, would take greater invisibility, basically allowing him to turn invisible, and as long as he passes increasingly difficult stealth checks, he can remain invisible. Now, of course, we didn't exactly spec into stealth with this build, but you absolutely could if you wanted to take that as your human proficiency, but I don't know. I feel like, again, Gale was just going to use this for trickstery nonsense, but it does have its uses. Again, you don't have to cast this on yourself. Cast it on Astarion, and all of a sudden he is now a lean, mean, invisible killing machine. Works for me. And I would also pick up Fire Shield here. Since we're going for like an Armour of Agathis thing, we can also throw on Fire Shield Cold on top of that to really amp up the ice retaliation damage, or throw on the fire damage to give us a fire and ice aura. Well, I should really make a fire and ice build. That could be fun. Like a fire and ice in one. Yeah, you know what? Let me know if you want to see that. If you're still watching at this point. I've kind of gone on a lot of rants and rambles here. At level 8 of Wizard, we will be able to pick up some more spells of the level 4 variety. And I actually think Otterluke's Resilient Spear is something that Gale would absolutely take here. Just cast a Spear of Shut Up on an enemy. Basically, they can't take any damage, and they avoid all spell effects. But the target speed is reduced by half, and it also prevents them from casting spells or dealing damage. So basically, you just get to take an enemy out of an encounter for a bit. It's a bit like banishment in a weird way. But again, I don't think Gale would want to banish his students, but if one student's acting rowdy at the back of the class, he's just going to Resilient Spear them. And I like to kind of... Resilient Sphere. And I think that I want to flavour it as like the fact that sound can't escape the sphere either, so it just shuts them up. I don't know. I think that's too fun. But as for our other spell, I think Dimension Door fits Gale quite nicely as well. I just feel like, again, he's a bit of a team player in this kind of form, stage of his life, so being able to teleport himself and an ally just feels kind of right. As for our feat here, we are just going to max out that intelligence. At Wizard level 9, we are going to get access to level 5 spells, and of course, the best kind of top tier illusion spell in the game, and which I mean it's kind of like the capstone illusion spell. We're grabbing Seeming, allowing us to disguise not just us, but 4 members of our adventuring party. Again, maybe you don't want to take this one if you're trying to build something else, but again, focusing on that bit of illusion with Gale, Seeming just feels right. And also Telekinesis, this just feels like a Gale spell, being able to pull things to him. Again, Mage Hand kind of does this, but Telekinesis allows him to throw big things around, which again, I made use of in the combat footage to much effect. And again, this is just a fun spell. If you've not really messed with Telekinesis in this game, I highly recommend you do so. In fact, I'd quite like to do a full telekinetic-themed build one day, but I kind of already did that with the Investigator build, so I don't know. I think I'd have to spice it up in a different fashion. Let me know if you'd want to see that as well. Next up at our capstone of level 12, we are going to get level 10 of Wizard, giving us improved Abjuration. Each time you take a short rest, the intensity of your arcane ward increases by an amount equal to our Wizard level. Because we're a level 10 Wizard, we're going to have a level 10 Arcane Ward right off the bat on a short rest, meaning that now we don't even have to charge to the darn thing, which is great. We also get another cantrip at this level, and I'll go with Acid Splash. And finally, 2 more level 5 spells. I think Hold Monster and Conjure Elemental are perfect. 2 of my favourite spells. And that is the build. Overall, you're getting a Wizard. What else can I say? You're getting a very powerful Wizard who has advantage on concentration saves and can basically abuse their subclass mechanic of Arcane Ward. Again, you want to be a Blaster, go with Evocation. You want to raise a Summoned Army, go for Necromancer. You want to be able to read the future, go for Divination. If you want to play to Gale's lore, then play Illusion. It's up to you. But overall, you're going to be getting all the stuff that we love in a character like this. A full caster that has access to Sanctuary is amazing, meaning that they can set up any spell they like that doesn't directly deal damage. So things like Haste, Slow, Fire Shield, all that sort of thing without worrying about taking damage first. You've got Guidance for those skill checks, Resistance for those saving throws, and then you've got all the great utility spells. Haste, Slow, Fire Shield, Mirror Image, Misty Step, Hold Person, Hold Monster, Telekinesis, and the powerful big obliteration spells, Scorching Ray, Firebolt, Magic Missile, Fireball, all of that great stuff. You get everything you could possibly want. Access to scrolls, arcane recovery to get those spell slots back. Like, you just have everything. And I feel like it feels just comfortable. This build is just a fun build to have. It feels so on theme for Gale, just getting all of this great stuff, and it fits great for a Mystra deity build as well. Again, if we're not playing this as Gale, this still works perfectly for Mystra. You're getting all of that knowledge-based stuff. You're getting the ability to use all of these different wizard subclasses in powerful ways. Everything here is augmented really nicely. But again, I feel like that Arcane Ward, the fact that it synergizes so nicely with Cleric, just feels closest to like a Cleric Wizard mix to me. I mean, one of my oldest builds, I believe it's the Mystic Theurge, was a kind of 6-6 split between Cleric and Wizard using this kind of feature. But I think this honestly could almost be considered a remastered version of that build, as I do think this one kind of gets the same idea down, but better. Anyways, let's get into the equipment if we just want to scoot you over there, Gale. Perfect. So, lots of stuff here, so let's get into it quite quick. The main thing here is the staff that I've chosen here. This is the kind of chosen of Mystra staff, obtained really early in the game as well, which is nice. Basically, it's just a basic staff, nothing too crazy to it, and if you're playing even if you're playing a pure spellcaster, you don't actually need a powerful staff to go with it. That's just if you want some extra features that it provides. Otherwise, it's not actually required. You could do this shit unarmed. So, if you really wanted to be as on theme as you can for a Mystra deity build, you would just keep this thing on. This is the Staff of Arcane Blessing. It gives you Mystra's Blessing, funnily enough. Bless grants an additional 1d4 to saving throws and weapon attack rolls, and an additional 2d4 to spell attack rolls. Basically, and it also allows you to cast Bless once per long rest even. This is why I wanted to grab Bless from Cleric, and why I feel like it has a kind of a connection to Mystra because of this specifically. Basically, allowing Bless to grant an additional buff to saving throws and weapon attack rolls allows you to be a really effective member of support for your party. Basically, you can do support spells like the big stuff, or from very early on, again, taking that cleric level early and getting this weapon early, you can enable a really, really powerful strategy of getting this enhanced bless on the whole party, and going absolutely nuts. And again, an additional 2d4 to spell attack rolls means that ranged spells are pretty much never going to miss for you, which is awesome. So, I quite like this overall. I think like it pairs really nicely with this build kind of thematically, but of course, say it with me, if you want a powerful Act 3 option, you can get the Marco Heshkir staff. Basically, this is the best staff in the game for mages. I'm not going to go over it in detail, but +1 bonus to spell save DC and attack rolls. Don't need you can choose not to use a spell slot once per long rest. It's a +2 weapon, so you can bonk someone if you need to, and Kareska's Favor is going to give you a bunch of buffs and a bunch of additional spells. Again, probably the most powerful endgame option, especially if you want to go for a more blaster caster focus, but for this build, I prefer this staff for the theming, but it's entirely up to you. Let's get into the equipment. The pointy hat. I had to include this in this build. Again, we're playing as a classic kind of stereotypical wizard. Like, again, if Gale went kind of full Elminster in his later years. So, we wanted a pointy wizard hat, and this is literally the pointy hat. And I wanted to give a shout out to one of the best D&D content creators on YouTube. Again, I'm only a small channel, so it feels like I'm kind of looking at this absolute titan who stands before me and just shouting, "You're doing a great job!" from like way, way down. But honestly, he is such a cool guy. Antonio D'Amico is a genuinely great YouTuber, and the fact that he got a reference in this game, I wanted to show it off. And it's perfect for this build, because we gain a bonus to persuasion checks equal to our intelligence modifier, so even though I dumped charisma, we can still have energetic, charismatic prankster Gale, because he gets a charisma skill based off his intelligence. That's right, the whole backstory I gave this character this whole time, all the headcanon and everything, was leading up to the justification for using this hat. I am amazing. Just kidding, I just thought of that now. Also, I promise I'm way more humble than that. Anyways, the pointy hat. Absolutely love it. But if you want something with a bit more utility than just that, we have a few options. And again, this is Act 3, but we have some early game options too. The Cold Brim hat. Whenever we inflict a condition on the target, they also get inflicted with Encrusted with Frost. Encrusted with Frost basically inflicts disadvantage on dex saves, which is always nice. Basically, inflict this and then Fireball, they're much less likely to succeed the save. And if there are 7 or more turns remaining, the entity must succeed a Constitution saving throw, which I believe is DC 12, or take 1d4 cold damage and become frozen. Frozen means that they cannot move at all. It breaks when you hit them with certain damage types, but completely incapacitating a foe is always nice. Again, this is another pointy hat. This is why it's here. Next up, the Hat of Fire Acuity. Basically, whenever you deal fire damage, you gain Arcane Acuity, giving you a bonus to spell attack rolls and spell difficulty class for each remaining turn. And next up, the Staff of Storm Science Power. The exact same thing, but for thunder damage. Again, these are all pointy hats, pointy wizard hats. But for a less pointy wizard hat, we have the Hat of the Sharp Caster as another Act 3 kind of option. Whenever you roll a 1 or 2 on a damage die for a spell attack, that die is re-rolled once, essentially giving you advantage on spell damage, which is kind of fun. And this is actually gained from Tara, Gale's companion, the Tressim, which makes total sense, so I think it's worth having this in your back pocket. Next up, let's get on to the rest of the equipment. The Cloak of the Weave. You gain a +1 bonus to spell save DC and attack rolls, and you can use Absorb elements once per short rest, absorbing elemental damage and dealing it back with your next attack. Pretty cool. We're mainly here because it kind of fits the vibe of the look, and that +1 bonus to attack rolls and DC is always nice to have. Again, this is more of the kind of bog standard endgame mage spellcaster build stuff. This is basically the same kind of equipment that I used on my Gale Origin build, but again, it feels like it just makes sense here. Next up, the Robe of the Weave. Same deal, a +1 bonus to spell save DC and attack rolls. Whenever the wearer succeeds a saving throw against the spell, they regain a bit of hit points and a +2 to our armor class, giving us a nice well-rounded armor class of 18 with all of our features here. And again, this is a late game option though, so if you want an early game option, we have the Obsidian Laced Robe. Basically, this is just a decent robe that you can pick up in Act 2, and on a successful saving throw against a foe spell, you retaliate with a bit of fire damage, and you gain resistance to fire damage as well. That being one of the most common magic damage types in D&D, and by extension Baldur's Gate 3, makes it very, very valuable to have, so it just feels kind of right for this build, and it looks nice. Although it is a bit orange, but there's nothing wrong with that. Next up, the Spell Might Gloves. Whenever you cast a spell that requires an attack roll, you can take a -5 penalty to the roll to deal an additional 1d8 of damage. This is a fun Act 3 option that I don't really show off that much. Apparently this works with things like Eldritch Blast as well, which, I mean, there's potential there. But it's kind of a worse version of Great Weapon Master and Sharpshooter, but for spells. Because where Great Weapon Master and Sharpshooter give a flat +10 bonus, it's only a 1d8. So you can be taking a -5 penalty to the roll to deal an additional 1 damage. On things like Magic Missile and, like I said, Eldritch Blast, this can be quite powerful, and this is definitely great on an Evocation Wizard build, especially if you combine it with the Hat of the Sharp Caster to basically be a really powerful Blaster Caster. I would say this definitely has value, but not as much value as you might initially expect. But I wanted to include it here because, again, it feels like a very kind of final piece of mage gear, just getting that extra bit of power on all of your spells. Maybe that's a bit of the orb's power coming out now that Gale has learned to control it. But again, this is an Act 3 option, and if you want a decent alternative that is also available in Act 1, which you may even decide to keep into the future, we have Daredevil Gloves. Again, a +1 bonus to spell attack rolls, always nice, and your ranged spell attacks are treated as melee spell attacks when you are adjacent to a hostile creature. One of the worst things about playing a squishy wizard is when you have to try and disengage and get away from enemies in order to cast your ranged spells, especially if you're not playing an Evocation Wizard. This helps with that, basically meaning that you can cast the spell first and then get away, without having to use things like Shocking Grasp just to do that, for example, or Misty Step, so you can kind of just get off your big blaster spell and move away. It just kind of helps you have to think less with the positioning, but again, there are other options as well if you feel like this isn't so valuable, but this is still a great Act 1 option to pick up until you get to Act 3 and you grab the Spell Might Gloves. And finally, we have the Evasive Shoes. These are just kind of generic shoes that felt good on this build. There wasn't really anything I wanted to grab. The only other thing I would have probably used is the Boots of Striding, but unfortunately, those are medium armor, so our unarmored defense would not work from that point. Boo. So the Evasive Shoes, just rounding out our armor class to that nice, solid 18, just felt right to me. So I think it's quite a good option. I will point this out here because I didn't actually end up using it on the build for fashion reasons, but there is a shield that would be very beneficial. Catherick Shield. Catherick Shield gives you a +1 bonus to spell save DC and attack rolls. Nice. Stacking with all our other equipment. Advantage on dexterity saving throw checks. Again, quite nice. And also buffing up our armor class to a total of 20. If you don't care about it looking kinda evil, you could definitely get a lot out of having this shield on your build. But again, for fashion purposes, I decided to keep it off. onto the accessories. Of course, I'm using the Spell Crux Amulet to allow us to use spell slot restoration. As a bonus action, once per long rest, we can restore an expended spell slot of any level, including our level 6 spell slot, of which we only have one of, giving us 2 level 6 spells per long rest, which is great. However, this is obviously a one and done type deal, so if you wanted to grab something else to use when you've already used this feature, the Amulet of the Devout, while normally reserved for clerics, works for us here. I mean, we are a level 1 cleric, but we don't have a Channel Divinity feature, so it's not exactly optimal, but it does give us one buff that I really like, and that is the +2 bonus to spell save DC. Again, if we're using the Spellmite gloves, we've pretty much completely offset the penalty here, which is great. Although this is spell save DC, not spell attack rolls. But again, we want as high a spell save DC as we can get, so things like telekinesis, slow, hold monster, all of that stuff basically is guaranteed to succeed. Next up, the Gale Origin exclusive ring. You only get this if you play as the Origin of Gale, not as having him as a companion in the party. But the Ring of Evasion is a really powerful ring that you'd get right away in Act 1 if you play as Gale, in which if you fail a dex save, you can use your reaction to succeed it instead. That's the whole ability. There's no once per long rest, once per short rest, once per battle, clause here. It's just whenever you fail a dex save, use a reaction to succeed. For those of you who are Yu-Gi-Oh nerds, and this is a weird tangent to go on, but I've done this before, you'll understand what I mean. Basically, there's this kind of unspoken rule that usually the shorter a card's effect is, the more powerful it is. And the fact that this is just, if you fail a dex save, you use your reaction to succeed, is just short, sweet, straight to the point, and it's one of the most powerful rings in the game. You can kind of see what I'm going for here. You know, Pot of Greed lets you draw 2 cards. And that's one of the most broken. It's so broken they had to ban it. I can see why this is limited to just the Gale Origin, because if every build had access to this, I would probably be using it in every build, because it's just that good. But again, this is if you are playing as the Gale Origin. If you're not playing as the Gale Origin, this is kind of a throwaway slot. You can put whatever you like in here. There's not really too many rings that synergize with a pure spellcastery build, but I can absolutely see the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel maybe working if you kind of wanted to try doing something that has the ability to use weapon attacks. But again, there's not too many things that directly synergize with this, so you'll have to play around and see what you can find. The other ring I've suggested, which again is kind of a throwaway slot, but every mage needs a friend, and this just felt so on theme for the build. It gives us a +1 to Arcana and Religion, which is kind of our whole thing as a Mystra Deity build, so it works in my opinion at least. And again, every mage needs a friend, so I feel like this ring just felt so right thematically, but I had to include it on this build. But really, these 2 ring slots are throwaway slots. Put whatever you like on here, but if you're playing as Gale, the Ring of Evasion is absolutely essential. And finally, there is some other stuff I want to talk about quick. This whole armor set is dyed in the Ocean dye, which gives it a bit of a brown and a blue. I kind of like blue on Gale. I know his main thing is kind of purpley, but he also has some blue to him, and I think the brown and blue just kind of work for this build. And also, I have to show this off. This is a modded piece of camp clothing, but this is Professor Gale in all of his glory. This is the SR Suits mod, I believe. It'll be linked in the description. And I just absolutely love it. I love Professor Gale. He's just too cool. So I really wanted to show this off, but I decided to keep the vanilla look for this build for those console players. But if you're on PC, Professor Gale, it's right there. I'd pick it up. Like I said, link in the description. But yeah, I do think that's everything. That is the build. Yeah, sorry this was a bit of a long one. But again, just when you really start, I just like the Origin characters in this game. I like talking about them, and I feel like I kind of want to do more what-if scenarios with these characters. I think it could be fun in the future, maybe basically another round of Origin builds. I mean, for this one, this kind of doubled as a Deity build anyway, so it just fit in nicely with the channel, but I did a Vampire Hunter Astarian build, which was kind of a what-if thing. I'd love to do, maybe builds for, if characters went down their evil routes or something like that, or just other kind of headcanon-y situations, maybe builds based on what happened to them after the end of Baldur's Gate and based on their dialogue in the epilogue and such like that. There's so many different ways I could explore these characters, maybe Karlach as the Hellfire of Avernus or something, because after going back she just got even stronger and became so infamous of just killing high-powered demons, but maybe even Zariel and Mephistopheles and others took greater notice of her. Then there's Will, what exactly happened to him? I know he kind of became a ranger, after he lost his Warlock power, so maybe there's a Ranger Will build in the future that could be really fun. See if I can work off a little bit of that. I mean, hell, I'd be down to do, like a Lae'zel build about, like, what happens maybe after she sides with Orpheus, like how she rebels against Wakif, and how that build kind of came out. I mean, I kind of did that with the original Lae'zel Origin build, but I'd be interested in exploring that a bit further. I mean, there's so many opportunities to work with these characters with such open-ended kind of, well, endings to them, that I really feel like I should explore this further, so let me know if you want to see that in the future. But yeah, as for everything else, this will be going up tomorrow as of the time I'm recording this, so that's a Friday. There's going to be a live stream this weekend in which I'm going to be playing some content warning with my friend Red, who you've seen a few times on the channel. Going to have some fun there, please join in if you feel like it. And I think this is kind of, I'm going to get into something a little bit here, because I know the combat footage is slightly longer for this one. I'm thinking I want to start experimenting again on this channel. I kind of did that already with the Dragon's Dogma video I posted recently. Shameless plug, go watch it if you haven't already, but I feel like if you're this far in the video, you probably have watched that one already. But I kind of want to experiment again on the channel. I want to do some more kind of like bonus videos here and there that are not quite as elaborate as the Dragon's Dogma video, but kind of do the same thing that I do with my current videos, which is just like longer form content, which you can just throw on in the background while you do other stuff and just kind of listen to it. I kind of want to experiment with more content in that sort of vein. I think I'm going to do a proper channel update soon, where I'm going to basically pitch a whole bunch of ideas to you guys about things that I want to do with this channel in the future and get a general consensus about what you guys think. Because I think I have a lot of room to experiment here. I think I have a lot of room to start doing newer things. I want to do new things that still are basically the same kind of deal for what I already do here, the same kind of vibe, but just aren't build videos. Just things that you can slap on in the background while you work on stuff, or while you're on your walk, or you're on your drive to work, or something like that. Just various different things, like, and again, stuff that fosters community engagement. 'Cause the other big thing about this channel is that I love engaging with the community. I love getting you guys involved in the creation process here. So I've got a few other ideas there for things I want to work with. But again, I'm going to do kind of a full channel update because there's a lot more I want to say than just that. And I think it's something that a lot of you guys will actually need to hear, because I think the future of this channel at the moment, it's going to go a different direction fairly soon. And you'll see what I mean. But again, look out for a dedicated update video in the future. But yeah, that is going to do it from me. Thank you all so much for watching. I really hope I didn't drive you off or with my, Gale fan cannon, but hey, whatever. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.